What's up, everybody? James Duggan here with IGN to talk you through 18 minutes of Outriders gameplay that I captured down in LA at a preview event. I got to play for about 3 or 4 hours, and this is from the studio People Can Fly, who you may recognize from Gears of War Judgment as well as Bulletstorm. Now, before we dive into this, I just want to tell everybody that if you want to see this gameplay without any commentary, without my yapping, you can do so at IGN.com. So check that out if you want. Now, what is Outriders? Well, it's a cooperative shooter RPG. A little bit of cover-based, a little bit of high-mobility ARPG, and a lot of awesome combat and gun feel, and it comes together really, really nicely. You can play cooperatively with up to 3 players, and this is not a game as a service, say the developers Bartek Mita, the creative director, as well as Joshua Rubin, the lead writer. I had a chance to interview them, and I'll be referencing some of their answers to my questions while we go over some of this gameplay. And straight away, my impressions of it are very, very good from the limited amount of time that I had to play. Now, does that mean that everything I played was totally devoid of problems? Of course not. For starters, I think that the high-mobility, skill-based combat was a lot more enjoyable than the cover-based combat. I found the cover was useful sometimes, but some, kind of essential cover-based mechanics, like being on the corner of a piece of cover and moving to the next side of it, were not in the game, which was surprising, so that element didn't feel great. But the good news is the mobility felt phenomenal, the skills felt phenomenal, and the gunplay felt really, really, really good. I'm generally more of a first-person shooter guy. We can see the inventory here, and I'm kind of tinkering around with my loadout. Generally more of a first-person shooter guy just because the gun feels better, usually. The only weapon that I've ever really loved the feel of in a third-person shooter is the Nasher shotgun, which the shotgun I'm using right now actually feels a lot like. But in Outriders, I was very surprised to find that I really like using the DMR, the sniper rifle, the revolver, and the shotgun. So big ups in that department. There's also a lot of thematics going on. This is a very story-based, relatively linear game compared to something like Destiny, but not entirely linear. And we're approaching our first look at that, so I'm going to shut up and let you experience the dialogue.
Altered, you're too late.
What happened here?
What does it fucking look like? We got mutilated. We had the bastards cornered, but they had a captain.
Where is he?
Inside the bunker up the hill. I wish I could look him in the eyes when you make him pay for what he did.
I think I'll pay him a little visit.
So we saw some branching dialogue options there, and I asked lead writer Joshua Rubin if there would be meaningful choices to be made in terms of dialogue, and he said, surprisingly, no, there will not. That's not really what Outriders is about, and I have to say I respect that answer. It's a cooperative multiplayer game. It's an RPG shooter. It's got a lot going on already, and one of the reasons why I'm excited for Outriders from playing it and speaking with the developers is not just what it promises to do, but specifically what it promises not to do. I like Destiny a lot, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel that the RPG elements of the weapons were a little bit hamstrung in order to be competitively balanced for PvP. Outriders will not have any PvP. Creative director Bartek Mita says, it's so hard for us to balance this game as a proper PvE experience that we basically would be unable to create good PvP content that's balanced, so let's finish the game and make the PvE experience as good as possible. And I have to say that that really shows through, even in the first chapter. There were some really cool weapons I picked up. One of them had a modifier called Bone Shrapnel that anytime you killed an enemy created an explosion that dealt a bunch of damage to the folks around them. And you can see these abilities that I'm using, teleporting behind somebody, slowing them, slowing movement and projectiles, the one-shot slice. That would all be very OP in PvP, so kind of like Borderlands, this game definitely skews towards PvE because there is no PvP. And therefore, all the loot and the RPG elements, I think, click a little bit better. So this, I thought, was going to be a pretty conventional tank and spank cover-based shooter boss fight. Boy, was I wrong, as I'm conflagrated by a giant swirling flame tornado. That was pretty much the only mechanic of this fight. This is kind of a side quest mini-boss. But boy, was it enough to freak me out and make me think on my feet, and I really appreciated that about it. Here we can see that kind of going around cover woes that I think needs to be ironed out before the game releases. Obviously, this is releasing in holiday 2020, so plenty of time to do that. The abilities work on bosses. They freeze them, as you can see, but they're a little bit diminished in the sense that as soon as you shoot the boss, he kind of snaps out of it. Same with this temporal slow time effect. So a little bit of diminishing returns, but not enough to make the abilities feel hamstrung. Finding a nice little vantage point to just lay some shotgun fire into that boss. But the Flame Tornado stops me from playing this as a tactical shooter. A lot like the way that something like Doom Eternal makes you mix it up in order to play successfully. I think this flame mechanic does exactly that. Comboing the skills there, allowing to get some close shotgun stuff here. You can see that I've dropped down to very low HP at points, and I'm healing back up. Every class, there are 3 classes I'm playing as the Trickster. Actually, there are going to be 4 at launch, but 3 in the build that I played. Every class has a unique healing mechanic, and we'll talk about exactly what those are as soon as I execute this guy.
Wait! Stop! You're an alter. You can do whatever the fuck you want! Why the fuck are you fighting for those fascist assholes? We're the ones fighting for our lives! Do you even know what they did to us?
I know what you did to me.
All right, NPC dealt with. One of the things I really appreciate about the side quests, it's not open world, but there is definitely travel time associated with kind of branching onto the various spokes. The developers described it as a series of hubs and spokes, the missions, approximately 20 of which you're about to see the majority of the first one, although I've cut out a lot of gameplay to kind of fit within the 20-minute time constraint. Going back to the map here, I'm going to teleport back to that banner that I placed in the center and turn that side quest in. From here on out, I'm going to be talking over cutscenes, so remember, if you want to see this without my commentary, IGN.com. So, I'm playing as the Trickster, a class all about bending the rules of space-time, hit-and-run tactics, close range, and as a result, the passive healing mechanic for the Trickster is when you kill somebody in close range, you heal, very simply. Any class has an amount of passive regeneration when you're in cover or out of cover and just not taking damage that heals up to a certain point. The other 2 classes playable at this point are the Pyromancer, which is a medium-range fire conjurer. Be sure to check back to IGN tomorrow because I'll be posting gameplay of that class, which is just as fun, surprisingly, as the Trickster. They heal by killing enemies that they've marked, so you can kind of heal at a longer range than something like the Trickster. And the Devastator, who I enjoyed, but not as much as the other 2. Close range tank, stand your ground type character, kind of a Geomancer. Here I'm picking a reward, and you can see the modifications there. Clip combustion, reloading creates a damaging shockwave. Going to purchase that automatic shotgun. These are epic weapons that have 2 modifications on them, and then there are legendary ones as well that have 2, and then maybe something special in addition to that. And obviously these all have different statistical mechanics. Going to go over here to the armor bender and do the same thing. This is actually Pyromancer gameplay. I don't have any shop footage from the Trickster, so this is what I have. And you can buy kind of gear sets that require a higher level. If you want to get better gear, what you're going to do is you're going to increase the world level. So whether you're playing through a side quest or the main story, your first time, second time, whatever level you are, you can increase the world level to get more challenging and frequent enemies that drop better loot. Kind of analogous to something like a Torment level in Diablo. Jumping back into the action, I want to talk specifically about what's happening on screen. So using the sniper rifle here in cover, just trying to pop some heads. Show everybody at home that we're not all bad at games. we all play quite a bit. Getting some melee characters here. Going to use this big temporal bubble slow that not only slows the characters, but you can also see slows the projectiles, kind of like a wizard in Diablo 3. And some of these guys, martyrdom status, drop grenades on the ground, which definitely mixed it up. So going back to tactical cover-based shooter mode after kind of being ARPG focused there, I have this very heavily armored enemy who I'm not sure has a weak point. Using my time slice there to just annihilate all of the weaker enemies and just left to clean up these larger guys who shooting in the body, dealing some decent damage, and then there's the martyrdom grenade effect, which of course hits other enemies. I can use that teleport ability. The names are Hunt the Prey, that's the ability I used, the slow trap, which is the big bubble, and then the temporal slicing. Picking the headshot there. Promoted to World Tier 4, so now I can kind of get some better loot and increase the difficulty, but I can bump that back down if I want to. All right, we're going to look at our second mini-boss here, whose special power was standing still and getting shot in the face. Not as great of a fight as the other two, if I'm honest, but still something different. He has these kind of freezing orbs that I imagine if you stand in, you probably get frozen. Again, diminishing returns on the abilities there. And I played all of this single player, but I imagine this would be extremely fun in a cooperative setting. And I asked the developers about that. I asked, what are you doing to make this interesting to play with your friends? The response was essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, you'll have to synergize skills on higher difficulties, and upping the world level is really where multiplayer shines. But if you just want kind of a sit back, relax, kill some baddies, drink beer with your friends, that's also a possibility. So slow trap, these are the skills I was talking about before. I just unlocked one called Twisted Bullets, which is essentially a damage steroid for the full magazine of the gun. So definitely better on something like an LMG or sniper rifle. And we're going to progress here to the final fight of this level. I've skipped over a lot of combat just to fit in the time constraint, and I'm going to try and talk you through the mechanics. I think the things that stood out to me about Outriders, just firing from the hip here, the moment-to-moment feel for a third-person cover-based shooter was really fluid, really fun, very frenetic. The boss fight stood out to me as remarkable. In spite of the one we just saw, the one before it with the flame tornado, and the one coming up, I think has a lot of mechanics that are very pronounced, very fun, and it all really clicked. That part felt great. I could fight these enemies all day long and not get bored. And the developers assured me that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of enemy variety. There are some clearly non-human enemies you're going to be fighting. There are bigger, even gigantic enemies you'll be fighting over the 20 missions. So while we fight this boss, who, if you'll take note, has this really cool lightning gun, throws these lightning storm telegraphs as well as that kind of steel rebar electrocuted ground effect, which, by the way, doesn't go away. He's going into the storm mode, and I have to run away from those telegraphs. Classic, awesome boss design here. I really enjoy this kind of stuff, trying to get some shots off while I'm running. But he has kind of that soft and rage mechanic in the sense that if you take too long to kill this guy, the entire arena is going to be covered in that steel rebar, and you're not going to be able to stand anywhere without taking damage, theoretically anyway. Let's talk about the model of Outriders while I fight this boss. It is not a game as a service, and the developers really drove home that that doesn't mean there won't be an endgame. I asked them, do you want to create endgame content? Is there meaningful cooperative endgame content in Outriders? Bartek said, yes, we definitely want people to stay with the game, but what will differentiate us from the game-as-a-service game is that we will give the end-game content when we release the game. So for the price, when you buy the game, you'll have the content to enjoy it for a lot longer if you want to stay with the game and stay in the world. So I think when they say game-as-a-service or not game-as-a-service, they're not talking about dropping the post-launch support for this game, but rather that when it launches, there will be a significant tail to it already. At least that's what they're saying. All of this is unverified, and as with any game, take it with a grain of salt until you see the reviews. But so far, so great, and I think that is phenomenal. I wish I had asked the question, is this game offline playable or online only, but instead I just asked the PvP and the branching dialogue questions. But this strikes me as the kind of game that would be offline playable just because it being always online kind of wouldn't really vibe with that not a game as a service model, but I guess we'll see. Trying to use my abilities to the best of my ability here. They spoke about archetypes, or lack thereof. Like with Destiny, there are some classes that kind of thematically inhabit the space of the tank, the healer, but mechanically, they're not as rigid. You can supposedly build a more supportive character if you want to, but the game will not require it. It will not be a scenario where, hey, we need a tank, and then a healer, and then one DPS. You can all be 3 DPSs, you can all be 3 tricksters, and you can all succeed at the highest levels of play with just about any composition. But if you are into playing more of a tanky character or more of a healer character, you can absolutely do that as well. The build possibility is augmented, obviously, by the skills. You can equip 3, but there are a lot more to unlock. The gear, the modifications on the gear and the weapons. And then there are skill trees, which will allow you to kind of specialize. Definitely didn't edit out some potato sniper shots there. Definitely just sick headshots like this one. Boom. See ya. That does it for me. If you enjoyed the video or have questions, shoot me a follow on Twitter at Duggan. And for all things Outriders, including the Pyromancer gameplay as well as the no commentary gameplay, keep it locked to IGN.com.
Come. We must speak.
They asked you to help them. To fight the altar down there. Why didn't you?
That pathetic monstrosity was a distraction.
People are dying because of him. Without the supply route open.
They all die. These feeble creatures. Slaughtering each other over scraps. You waste your gifts. Running errands for them. Trying to win their meaningless, endless war. You must realize, you are not like them anymore.
So what? I should play at being a god like you.
I am not playing. But you are something even more. Altered and Outrider. The last Outrider. Do what you were sent here for. Go! Beyond the frontier. These people need their gods. Only one like you could lead them to a future.
Why not you?
They call him Moloch. I fight another war, far above this petty squalor. My war is with the worst of our kind. This one is too powerful. He will destroy us all, unless I hunt him down. But this is not your fight. You are to be the shepherd. Find a way for them out of this slaughter, Outrider.
Sure, it's done. Your supply line's open, I'm heading home.